All right, so it's November, you guys, the start of the holiday season. And if you're like me, you've already started to put together the list of all the things you need to get done. You got to start thinking about your meals. You've got to start thinking about your presents you need to buy. You start thinking about the Christmas cards you have to make, and the list can start to get overwhelming. But I want to share with you today a way that you can make at least one of the things on your item a little less overwhelming. And that's putting together your Christmas cards. We all want to create beautiful Christmas cards, but those take time. But there's a few things that you can do before you start putting together your cards that will make the process that much easier. And that's what I want to share with you today. A few of my personal tips and tricks that I used to try to make the season a little less overwhelming. Now, we're not going to get out of preparing the meals, unfortunately, but at least we can make creating our Christmas cards enjoyable and not an overwhelming task. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do when you're getting ready to start creating your Christmas cards is to pre-cut out your cardstock. Now, ordinarily, we're going to be creating either A2 cards or 5x7 cards. I know some of us create slimline cards as well, so you can plan for that also. I typically will make A2 cards, which are your 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So that's normally what I'll cut out. I'll cut out several colors of panels, which are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then from there, when I sit down to start to create, if I need to cut it down a little bit more, I have just a stack of colored paper that I can work with. Now, for my cards, I usually cut out just the primary colors that I'm going to be using. I don't necessarily cut out the designer paper, but that's not to say you don't have to do that as well. A lot of the paper that I use, which are the solid colored cardstock, are to back my designs. So I'll tend to cut out more whites than some of the colored paper. But for the colored paper for the holidays, I'll typically cut out some reds, I'll cut out some greens, I'll cut out some black, and then the majority of my paper that I'm going to cut out are my whites. So once you have your cardstock cut out, don't stop there. You can also pre-cut out your card bases. Now, I know a lot of us probably use heavier cardstock for the card base. At least I do. And I have a special paper stack that I save specifically for my card bases. So I'll dig into my stash and I will pre-cut several bases. I'll cut 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'll also cut 5x7 card bases because there's a few people that I like to make the bigger cards for. And then once I have all of my paper cut out, I sit down and I score it all and I put it into a nice little box ready to go. And this way, when I'm ready to mount my designs, I have my paper pre-cut right by my side, easy to grab. So in one evening, I can get all of my colored paper cut out, all of my card bases cut out, and now I'm ready to start creating. Well, maybe not quite yet. Okay, so the second thing that I do in preparation for creating my Christmas cards is I will cut out the dies that I think I'm going to be using. And sometimes I'll cut out dies that I'm not sure about just because I'm kind of on a roll. I'll cut out my rectangular dies, which I have some really nice stitched dies that create great borders for the inside on my sentiments. I'll cut out some of the more intricate dies, such as that oval. And then I'll also cut out letter dies because sometimes I just want to create a real simple card that might say ho, 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 Santa, just something really easy. So I will get out the dies that I think I'm going to be using for my holiday season and I'll pre-cut those. Now in my studio, I don't have my die cutting machine where I create. I actually have it on another station. So if I'm creating a card and I decide that I want to use a die cut, typically I'll have to stop what I'm doing, go find the die, pull out my die cut machine and cut the die. So I find if I pre-cut some of these dies early, I can put them in a little baggie, I can put them in a box, ready to go, so that way when I'm sitting at my work desk, I have them all cut out. Now there are some letter dies that I like to use regularly. I love this big set by Altenew, and it is great to create very simple cards. When I am working with letter dies, a lot of times I will use double-sided sticker tape or adhesive, and I mount that onto my cardstock. And then that way, when I cut it through with my die machine, I can have stickers. And this is really easy when I want to sit down and make my Christmas cards, because now I have sticker letters that will be easy to mount. Now, the reason that I like to use the double-sided sticker paper for my letters is, while this one isn't necessarily a problem, but some of my letters are pretty thin. And unless you have a glue stick or a glue pen that will work to adhere some of those thinner letters, the sticker paper really comes in handy. Because when you go to set down your letters, all you need to do is peel off the back, lay it down, and you're ready to go. And then you don't have to worry about the fuss of having to add adhesive to really small pieces or very thin pieces. All right, and while you have your die cutting machine out, you might as well pre-emboss some of your cardstock with your embossing folders. I don't know about you, but these are the products that I forget about the most. And I don't know why, because they create beautiful cards. But you're already at your die cut machine station. You might as well grab some of your embossing folders and emboss several cards so that way you have them ready to go when you sit down to create. And remember, you don't have to pre-cut or pre-emboss just Christmas card backings. You can pre-emboss several cardstock pieces for all of your seasons. You can get ahead of the game for 2022 by embossing several pieces of cardstock and putting them with your embossing folders. Now, don't forget about those intricate dies that you just cut out. This is something that you can also do ahead of time. You might have cut out several of these, but it's going to probably take a good 5 minutes to get all those little pieces out using your poker. Now, to be honest with you, this is probably one of the main reasons I don't use intricate dies, because I really don't have the patience to sit here and take out all of these little pieces. But boy, they sure make pretty backings, don't they? All right, so tip number 4 may only apply to some of you, because I know not all of you work with these intricate dies. And these are the colorized dies, or the dies that have several pieces that you have to use to put together your little characters or your little scene. I have several of these because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment, but I love the way that these turn out. They can be a little frustrating, and they certainly are time consuming. So if you can create these ahead of time and have your pieces all put together before you sit down to create your card, that's going to be a big time saver in the end. All right, so this next tip is great if you have several Christmas cards you need to make. Sometimes you can get away with pre-creating your backings. And what I mean by that is, if you don't plan on doing any very detailed cards, or if you're just going to create some very clean and simple cards, you can easily pre-create your backings by adding washi tape. And what I'll typically do is I will pull out several of my Christmas designs and I will just add them to my card bases. Sometimes I add them to all 4 of the sides. Sometimes I just add them to the top and the bottom. And sometimes I just add them to the bottom. It really depends. But I like to have a variety, because these are card bases that I can easily put cards together. I can sit down one evening and grab these pre-decorated card panels and just stamp. As you can see on this one, it's a very simple card, but it came out so pretty. Now, like I said, I'll do this with several of my Christmas washi tapes, just so I'll have a stack on hand. And like I said before, you don't have to just do this with Christmas tapes. You can do this with some of your other washi tape as well, and then just put them in your drawer ready to go. Now, the washi tapes come in several thicknesses. Sometimes the washi tape is a little bit thicker, sometimes it's thinner. And sometimes, to create a different type of a look, I will layer my washi tape. So if I have a solid washi tape, or if I have a patterned washi tape that's a very simple pattern, sometimes I will add an extra piece of washi tape over my washi tape just to create more interest. And this is an easy way to create several cards that are similar but not exactly the same. There are several stamp sets out there that have big sentiments. And if you were to stamp a big sentiment in the middle of this card, maybe add some embossing powder, you'd be ready to go. And these type of cards take no time at all to put together. Now, not only can you pre-decorate your card panels using your washi tape, but you can also do this with your inks as well. I have heard Tim Holtz say several times, just sit down and play. And this is a great way to create your card backs. You can get out some of your inks and just play. Get out some of your different colors, get out your spritzer, and just create backgrounds. And you can do backgrounds easily by just adding some water, using a paintbrush, and adding some color. You can get as simple or as intricate as you want to on these backgrounds. And it's a great way to create a stack of cardstock ready to go. Now, when I'm creating my backgrounds, I think about what type of cards I'm going to be creating. Typically, I'm going to create some winter scenes. So I'll bring out some of my blues and maybe even some of my beiges. But I also like to create vintage inspired cards. And those cards are more of your brown tones. You've got your beiges, you've got your browns, and you have your walnut stain, which is your darker brown. So not only will I create card bases that are for Christmas, but I think about the type of cards I'm going to be creating. And I create backgrounds that will work for any of those types of cards. Now, if I'm creating a specific card, so for instance, perhaps I want to create a night scene, or if I want to create a sunset, those types of backgrounds take a little bit more planning. What I'm talking about is just creating backgrounds that are multi-use, backgrounds that could work for any type of card. And as you can see, I was able to create 2 easy backgrounds in no time at all. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the inside of your cards. And a lot of times people forget about the inside of their cards because, quite frankly, a lot of creativity doesn't necessarily go into adding a sentiment, right? But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, especially if you plan ahead. So this tip is probably one of my favorite tips because I'll be honest with you, a lot of times I'll sit down and create a card and then I'll just put it away for a different occasion. And then when I go to use it, I have to pull out my sentiments to stamp a sentiment. I like to have pre-stamped sentiments because I can keep those in a drawer or in a shoebox, and I can just kind of sift through them when I'm ready to add them to a card. And I'll do different types of sentiments. For Christmas cards, I'll pull out several stamp sets to have different sentiments. Some of them are a little bit smaller, some of them are oversized, but I like to have a nice variety because I really don't want to add the same sentiment to every card. Well, honestly, I don't think anybody would know, but I know. And I want to be able to use some of these beautiful stamp sets that I only have the occasion to use once a year. So of course I'm going to use them during the holidays. And this is a great time to pull out those stamp sets that haven't had any use in a year and give them some attention. So I will pre-make several of the inserts. I'll pre-cut my cardstock, which was my tip number 1. And I will add it to my black cardstock. And I'll create, probably 20 or 30 of these. And then I'll pull out some of my sentiment stamps and I'll just start stamping. And this is an easy process because I don't necessarily have my card bases and my stamping set done all in one sitting. I might put together the black and white card base and put those aside. And then I might come back another night and do all of my stamping. It really depends, but this is a great way to create an assembly line for multiple card projects that you need to create. And then finally, probably the best tip that I can give you out of all of these tips is start with a clean slate. And what I mean by that is if you are a crafter and you craft regularly, I'm going to guess your crafting space is a little messy. Before you sit down to actually create your cards, start out with a clean slate. Get your work area completely cleaned so that way when you do start to create, you're not overwhelmed by the mess around you. I'm going to share with you a picture of what my desk looks like now. And I would not sit down to create Christmas cards with my desk looking like this because it's just too overwhelming. I'm going to lose things. I'm going to have to sort through several of the items on my desk that I'm probably not going to even use. So I will start with the clean slate before I sit down to put my Christmas cards together. That way I don't feel so overwhelmed. And a clean workspace on its own is just a good way to feel less overwhelmed. So I hope that these tips have been helpful for you, and I find that they're not only great for beginner card makers, but also for seasoned card makers as well. I think sometimes we just get overwhelmed or just overexcited about starting to create our Christmas cards. But if you do a little bit of planning, you'll find that the experience of creating Christmas cards is going to be so much more enjoyable. So I have several more videos that I'm hoping to share with you over the next couple of months. So I hope that you'll take the time to subscribe to my channel and hit the thumbs up if you've enjoyed this video. Also, I shared with you several products during this video, and I'll make sure that I leave links for you below. So that way, if there are any that you're interested in using in your Christmas projects, you'll be able to easily find them. So I guess it's okay to officially start playing our Christmas music because in my household, the Christmas season has begun. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.